Welcome to Women Winning Divorce. I am your host, Heather Quick. I am an attorney, entrepreneur, author, and founder of Florida Women's Law Group, the only divorce firm for women by women. I love thinking big, thinking outside the box, creating creative solutions for women, and empowering women to win in all aspects of their life. Our approach at Florida Women's Law Group is to provide women with a strategy to not only achieve their objectives, but win at life. I believe that what may show up as adversity is simply an opportunity to change and improve your life. In each episode, I sit down with innovative professionals and leaders who are focused on how you can be your best self before, during, and after divorce. In these conversations, we are looking at how women can win at life. I have the unique opportunity to meet women when they are at a transition period of life. But that is only the beginning to becoming your best self and winning at life on your terms. With our guests, we enjoy the opportunity to explore ways all women can win and enhance their life, no matter where they are in their journey. Because divorce is just a point in life, not the end and not what defines you, rather a catalyst for your growth.
Welcome to today's episode of Women Winning Divorce. I'm Heather Quick, owner and attorney at Florida Women's Law Group. Today, I am being joined by Megan Hunter, CEO and co-founder of the High Conflict Institute and co-host of It's All Your Fault, High Conflict People podcast, and author of several publications, including the High Conflict Co-Parenting Survival Guide. We're definitely going to touch on that in this episode. And she is an expert on high conflict disputes and high conflict co-parenting. She has served as president of the Arizona chapter of the Association of Family and Conciliation Courts, the Arizona Family Support Council, and Nebraska Child Support Enforcement Association. She served 5 years on the Arizona Board of Psychologist Examiners and currently serves on the board of Step Family Magazine. Girl, you are busy. You have been doing a lot.
Well, I'm old, so I've had some time to get things done.
Well, you've been busy during that time. I will
That's
tell
true.
you. But so Megan, please share a little. I mean, that was a lot, but I know there's more to it. If you'll share a little bit with me and our listeners, just about really how you got to where you are now, because you've been doing a lot of stuff.
Well, kind of the short version of the long, windy path was I was in a small town in Nebraska after graduating with a business and economics degree from a little tiny state college. And when you're in a small town, you sort of take the job you can find. And so it just so happened I took basically a secretarial job for the county attorney. And in that state, the county attorneys are responsible for establishing and enforcing child support. So I kind of started helping the gal that was doing that with child support, and I just fell in love with it and eventually became the child support person for that county. And then eventually that led me to being the child support specialist for the Arizona Supreme Court, administrative office of the courts. So it was legislation and policy and reviewing and revising child support guidelines and staffing legislative committees, things like that. And then I got really interested in the position of family law specialist at the Arizona Supreme Court. And when the person who had that role left, I got that position and fell in love with this common thread that was a problem with all of the stakeholders in family law. And that was high conflict divorce and custody battles. Judges didn't know what to do. Attorneys were frustrated. It was just really a really tough area that so it just kind of became my mission to understand what was happening in high conflict cases and why they take up the majority of time and resources, and why we can't seem to help them really truly resolve their issues. So I made it, kind of my goal to find someone who understood this particular population. And I came across a guy named Bill Eddy. He was a licensed clinical social worker and became a family law attorney after that, and started, he kind of put the puzzle pieces together on what was making up high conflict cases. So I brought him to train our family court judges in Arizona. Lots of light bulb moments. Brought him back to train custody evaluators, thinking I would have about 30, and I had to close the doors at almost 200. And it wasn't because they knew who he was. It was because the topic was so important and people are so desperate for information. Um, and so the final step of the process was, or I guess of my journey, was twisting Bill's arm and saying, look, everyone needs this information. So we started High Conflict Institute about 2 years later, and we've been around almost 17 years now.
Wow, that's amazing, Megan. And I'm really looking forward to getting into our topic this week, obviously, which is we're discussing high conflict co-parenting and how to set boundaries in these adversarial relationships. And I'm going to off the recording is figure out how to get you guys here in Florida, because this stuff happens all the time. And I think exactly what you experience. I know our judges experience frustration, so do the attorneys. And because of that frustration, we don't really know what to do, right? Like, what's that last resort, and how we help these people, because they keep coming back, right? They keep coming back to court and not really knowing what to do and how to work together. We, here in Florida, which we'll get into, we have some thoughts and things that we try to do, but overall, it's a big topic, and we obviously come across it in family law.
Absolutely. Yeah, we have to have the skills to help people who struggle in our systems. And this is the group that struggles in our system. So they're not conflict typical. So we cannot apply the same approaches with them that we do with everyone else. Other people are going through mediation successfully, maybe collaborative divorce, or settling it outside of court on their own. But why is it that this particular group, gets in our system and gets stuck in our system and comes back to our system? So we have to know how to do something opposite and something different with them, because you can't teach one way to the entire class.
Well, and that is the truth. So let's start with this, Megan. If you could just share with our listeners, what do we as attorneys, mental health professionals, experts like yourself mean when we say high conflict?
It's such a good question. I think we all have a collective idea of what it is. We know it's those cases that involve a lot of, allegations, disruption, blame. The kids seem to have a lot of extraneous issues that people may or may not recognize are related to this high conflict thing. But what makes it high conflict? Is it because it's been to court 14 times? Or as we were in Scotland a few months ago, and we were speaking in the Scotland Parliament about our New Ways for Families program, and there was a dad that came, and at the end of it, he spoke during the public comment section and said he had just done, I think, his 49th hearing hit the day before. So these are tough cases. But what's the true definition? So in our world at High Conflict Institute, we believe it's someone who has a particular pattern of behavior. So a high conflict case is going to have at least one or maybe two people who have this high conflict pattern of behavior. This is what makes them not conflict typical. And it's what draws them back to court again and again, or calling a lawyer again and again to resolve their issues. I've got a fire. It's a crisis right now. I need you to fix it now. I need you to file a suit now. I need you to get me hearing now. I want you to court, please penalize the other parent now. And that kind of repeats and repeats over and over again. And it's a particular, there are four particular defining characteristics of that what we consider a high conflict personality.
Well, okay. So is this, when you say high conflict personality, is this a mental health term, or is it something that you and Bill, through your research and development of your materials, have coined?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the term might have been out there. At least we know high conflict divorce, high conflict cases was out there, but high conflict personality, I think, was out there. But Bill Eddy at some point developed the theory around the high conflict personality. And what he'd done was recognize that there, and this was based on his work in psychiatric clinics for about 12 years before becoming an attorney. And then once he became an attorney, a family law attorney, he started to recognize these same patterns that he'd recognized, in the mental health setting. And what that was is, like if you boiled it down into 4 defining characteristics, it was people who blame. Like their automatic first thought is, it's all your fault. I'm the victim. Always the victim. Always your fault. Number 2, unmanaged emotions. So it's everything feels like a crisis now, and I'm going to cry. I'm going to get really angry. And when I'm angry, I have no impulse control. I'm going to call, make that phone call. I'm going to scream and yell. I'm going to email, text, whatever, right? Or maybe even physical violence. Which is an extreme behavior, which is the 3rd defining characteristics. So when we talk about extreme behaviors, it's really something that's outside of most people's norm. So you can look at it this way: if this behavior is something that 90% of other people would never do, it's probably high conflict, right? Because most people don't rage drive. Most people don't scream and yell when things don't go their way. Or, slash their ex's tires, or move the kids to another country without notifying the other parent. Those are extreme behaviors.
Right.
And then the last one is all or nothing thinking. So it's kind of like a my way or the highway. You're my friend or you're my enemy. You're all good, you're all bad. And they just think in those terms. And so kind of those are the 4 patterns that repeat themselves over and over with the person who has a high conflict personality. And underneath of that, well, I guess that's the underneath, but as part of all of that is defensiveness and inability to accept feedback. Everything feels like criticism, lack of empathy, lack of remorse, and a lot of fear. These are fear-driven personalities. So that's what keeps all of this high conflict engine going. And I think with the high conflict personality, we want to think that it's hard to think that someone may behave and operate differently. So I look at it as an operating system, and it's just, they're just going to behave differently. They are wired differently, and so they become very, very predictable. So that's in a nutshell. Of our definition of high conflict personality. And then one last little thing on it is what I've started teaching lately to really help people hone in on what this is and what it looks like is, for most of us, when things don't go our way or things don't go to plan, or to plan the way we thought they would in our mind, we might get upset. We might not like it. We might even yell, but we get past it. We get over it, we let it go. With the high conflict personality, they're not going to do those things. Their fear-driven personality, their operating system is going to cause them to behave in all of those ways that end up being blaming, all or nothing thinking, unmanaged emotions, and extreme behaviors.
That it's so good. I have so many questions, so I've got to pace them out, right? But you've written this book, which is amazing, the High Conflict Co-Parenting Survival Guide, which for all our listeners, there's going to be a link so that you can get this book for sure. I may have to get several in my office for everybody. But you mentioned something in your book as a possible characteristic is the frequent filers, not frequent flyers, frequent filers. Now, meaning, I guess, obviously someone who wants to, or maybe does carry out like just multiple court filings. And why might somebody do that? Like what, I guess, is the reasoning behind that, if you know?
Yeah. So if you bring everything back to the fear-based personality, this high conflict personality, we believe there are 5 different fear types. So one of them is fear of feeling inferior and powerless. So in that case, that person really needs to win. And where are you going to win? You're going to win in court, or at least you think you will. So you get the most expensive lawyer, or the most, the bulldog to go and fight for you to win at all costs, right? So that it can often be self-sabotaging. But it's really underneath it is this fear that drives people to come back and again to court. So if it's someone, a fear type that needs to feel attached and connected, and they fear feeling abandoned, then they may come to the court. They just have, a lack of emotion regulation. And so it feels like the world's falling apart, like it's a crisis right now, even from some perceived micro abandonment. It might not even be real, but they feel it is very real. And the only way to get satisfaction is from the court. So there's this constant coming back to court, either to feel superior, to feel connected, to feel dominating. That's a big one. That's the antisocial personality. Or to have attention. The histrionic personality, some, not all. And let me just give a disclaimer right here. This is not a blanket statement that anyone with one of these personality types has a high conflict personality. The bright line test is those who blame that and have that kind of repeating pattern of behavior. But yeah, that's why they come back to court. They're seeking someone in authority to agree with their thinking.
Now, as I've got to mention this because we're talking about different personality types, but I didn't hear the narcissistic personality. But do you see that, or am I off base?
Oh, you're totally on. And that was, I kind of masked that when I mentioned it. When I said fear of feeling inferior and powerless, that's the narcissist. That's the narcissistic personality. And, as you know, and your listeners too, I'm sure there are people who are very self-absorbed, especially in this current environment. So there are people who are self-absorbed, and then there are people who are really have a pattern that is really disruptive to relationships. And so this person needs to feel superior in the relationship all the time, in their interactions all the time. So they want the judge to agree with them. See me as special, see me as awesome, and then I'll feel powerful. But as soon as I don't feel special or I feel inferior, then I got to do something to get back to feeling superior again. So that means file something in the court or put you down, or I just need to win, period.
I've been in enough of these situations. They don't always win at all, but yet they're still hopeful, I guess, because they believe they're so right. They believe that there's no way that you can't agree with me and see it.
It's very self-sabotaging, and they don't see it, and you can't get them to see it. It's how their system is wired. And so trying to get them to see it is really a waste of time.
Yeah, I know, and we're going to get into it because I know many of our listeners are like, amen, I'm so frustrated. And they don't, in which we're going to talk about co-parenting and really how you deal with this when you're on the other side of it. But we do have to take a short break, and we're going to be right back. And for our listeners during this time, we would love it if you would leave us a 5-star review, as well as let us know which episode has been most helpful to you so far. And we will be right back. Alrighty, so we are back from our break, and again, today I am joined by Megan Hunter, CEO and co-founder of the High Conflict Institute. And there's something I wanted to touch on because we mentioned your book, but in your book, you do make it a point to highlight that you can't change your past, and you can't change who you've had your children with. Although I know so many of you wish you could, and I'm not saying that's the right thing, but I know that's what you're thinking because I've heard it too many times. But you can focus on your own wellness, especially if you're tied to this high conflict co-parent. And you mentioned that in your book. If you could just expand on it a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting and funny because, our whole universe is about, at High Conflict Institute, is about high conflict, and it's mostly divorce, but a lot of workplace and, family and neighborhood is all over the place. But in the divorce arena, it's just so kind of interesting that people will come to us and say, man, I wish I could have, I wouldn't have had children with that person, which, Yeah, we all do. And how do we know in advance? So Bill and I finally wrote a book called Dating Radar. So we
Oh,
really wanted
love
to
that.
be, yeah, we wanted to have kind of a prevention thing, but it turns out the only people that read it are the folks that have already been through it. And they're like, they read it and go, oh, wow, this is what happened. Oh, now I get it. Where we think it should be like required reading for everyone in high school and college.
All right,
But
I'm
anyway,
ordering that one for my teenagers. There you go.
yeah, exactly.
And you too, Olivia, all the rest of the young ladies in my office who have a chance to get on it on the front end, right?
Right. No excuses. Once you know, you can't unknow. So, yeah,
That's
so
right.
it shows we need to be really careful and cautious, about who we're choosing to have children with and marry and cohabitate with, buy houses with, commingle finances with, all of those things. You really need to know someone for at least 6 months to start to see some of these patterns. Within a year, we honestly wouldn't recommend anyone getting involved in anything permanent that where you haven't known someone for a year at least, because you will start to see some of these things and then you have to make decisions and choices. So yeah, so but if you're already there and you've had a relationship with this person and it hasn't worked out, you can't beat yourself up too bad. What's past is past. And you have to focus on the now and what do I do now, and just being the best role model you can for your kids and taking care of yourself.
And right, and one of those ways is educating yourself, which is what we're talking about, so that you can then learn to set boundaries, which that's what I'd love, for you to for us to jump into next and explain, because when you know better, you do better. Um, ideally, right? And so um you do have to take what you say in your book, responsibility for your own feelings, and then you outline a method called have, feel, and move. So I'd love it if you would explain that for our listeners, because I found it really fascinating.
Well, I have to give 100% credit for Have Feel Move to my co-author, Andrea La Rochelle, who wrote the majority of the book, because I was on the road training a ton in in that time period. But I think we've been taught, many of us have been taught over our lifetime that we, ignore our feelings, we just get through it, and we don't really stop to process these things.
Mhm.
And high conflict co-parenting is really I think one of the most difficult things you'll ever go through, particularly when if alienation is involved or allegations, false allegations, things like that. It's just tough stuff. And you're thinking about, how am I going to um, protect my child or my children and from the really bad behaviors of the other parents and things like that. So have, feel, move is a way that we can stop and kind of take care of ourselves, because you have to take care of yourself. So you have to allow yourself to have the feeling and give yourself permission to have the feeling, and then then move into feeling the feeling, which can be hugely uncomfortable. We don't like to feel that anxiety and yuck, and it's really uncomfortable, but it's okay to just even set a timer, for a few minutes, maybe 3-4 minutes, to feel that feeling. Just stay with it, because it's going to go away. It's not going to stay forever. So let it be there, get it out, and then or feel it, and then we want to move it along. And you can move it a variety of ways. Pick your pleasure. It could be writing about it, writing out that stressful event that's got you feeling this way. Um, Movement, as far, physical movement, running, jogging, whatever, do some knitting, whatever it is, that thing that you'd like to do, even screaming into a pillow, whatever, just kind of move it along. I prefer the writing technique. You're not going to send it anywhere, or you can destroy it afterwards if you want, but there's a real benefit to writing some stressful event on paper, because we tend to get trapped in right brain when we're under stress and in anxiety. And right brain is where negative feelings, we have a lot of negative feelings, because that's kind of fight and flight center. So hurt, negative, anger and negativity. And we can get really trapped there. And when we do, we're probably going to have those same 4 defining behaviors. We may feel like it's somebody else's fault. We may feel that, we may have some unmanaged emotions. We may do something extreme and have our own all or nothing thinking. So writing gets us across the bridge from right hemisphere to left hemisphere. And left is where we, have logic and rational analysis and doing things slowly and one at a time. So in my world, when I'm feeling anxiety and stressed by, a work project, or I have too much to do, or a family situation, whatever it is, I'll go do a little accounting work of something that I know how to do, not something I don't, because I don't need more stress, but I need something that's going to get me in left brain and whole brain so that I feel better and I can think more clearly and make better decisions. And so that's a good way to get people moving. And I'll add one last thing. I know I'm talking a lot. This is a long answer. But I've been watching a lot of Dr. Gabor Mate on YouTube, and he
Okay.
talks about chronic stress and the impact it has on our bodies and our brains, leading to autoimmune diseases and all these problems that we see across the board in women in particular. And so we have to take care of ourselves. If you're in that co-parenting situation that's going to go on for another 15 years, you cannot let this ruin your life and your health.
And I think what when you were going through what you were talking about, and as far as like how you get into that relationship, and obviously trying to prevent that and see the signs, but what it made me think of, Megan, is that when COVID happened, um, everybody was stuck together, and so you may have been able to cope, right, with this kind of relationship, this kind of person, maybe because he traveled, or whatever the work schedule was, because there was some space in between. It was just different. And then, I think that right really shone a light on so many of these cases, because then, many people couldn't live together anymore or be in that lockdown situation with someone of such high conflict. And so I don't know that it's like there's more people out there now, but I think that kind of common event that all of us in this world experience to some degree or another, we're really seeing a lot more of it. Certainly in the divorce family law field, not that it's just new, but I think, prior to that, people have ways to cope. I mean, they know there could be listeners here that are married and be like, absolutely, that's my husband. But I'm not going through a divorce right now, but, I can manage it. But eventually, I think it gets to a point where you can't manage it.
Yeah, it's true. And you're spot on about maybe the increase in um, I don't know if there's an increase in people with high conflict personalities. I speculate that there is, just solely because parents who have high conflict personalities role model this for children, and children make a choice eventually as they become adults. If they've been, and some don't even get to make the choice, they develop this high conflict operating system themselves, just on what they've seen and the stress they've had to go through, and the conflict and all of that, or lack of attachment and some trauma. All of those things can contribute. But we've we've had this huge surge in, at least at High Conflict Institute, in training requests, not just from the family law divorce field, but from education and healthcare and workplace. And for 2.5 years, almost 3 years now, every single organization who's contacted us, without exception, has said the gloves have come off since COVID. And they came off during COVID, right?
Right.
And they thought they would put the glove, they would be, people would kind of settle down after things got more normalized, but the gloves are still off. And aggression has stayed high, bullying has stayed high, division, divisiveness, the extreme behaviors. So, our have people kind of developed maybe a light version of a high conflict personality through this? I don't know, but I do know that across the board, across the world, across industries, aggression and conflict is up.
Yeah, I was speaking with a judge last week, and that was he said that, and he's there every day in the courtroom, and just says people are so angry.
Yeah.
People are angry, no matter what kind of situation they're in. But like, okay, so here's one thing for you in light of that, but it follows up because we're talking about this same topic throughout. But when we talk about communication, And obviously, we have various ways to communicate. A lot of people prefer text. That's not like my number one go-to. I'd prefer to speak on the phone. However, especially in the family law setting, a lot of texting or through apps. But then there's email. But anyway, it gives a lot of room to, key in whatever you want to say quickly and then immediately. But you have a method or school of thought on this called BIFF. I was wondering if you could share that because I think that would be really helpful.
You bet. And you're exactly right. Technology has given us this open forum to, for people with a high conflict personality to just torture the other parent, right? Because there is a lack of impulse control because it's so fear driven, and I need to win, I need to dominate, I need to feel attached, I need to feel the center of attention, and so it just comes out instantly. And so we've developed the BIFF response, but I'll give you a little background first. If we think of the person with a high conflict personality of being they get trapped in their right brain when things don't go their way, when they're in this fear mode, and it happens, in like a millisecond, because the amygdala hears a tone of voice it doesn't like. The brain, the amygdala senses, maybe a hand movement or a body, whatever. There's just this loop that goes round and round, and it gets them trapped in right brain where they're feeling this fear and anxiety, and I have to win, I have to dominate, I have to feel attached. So I've got my phone, I just type it out really quick. All that junk, that anxiety, that fear that's in right brain comes out in that text or email. They hit send, and as soon as they hit send, they feel better. Anxiety, right? Now it lands on the co-parent, and the co-parent now feels like garbage because now it's all landed on me, and how do I respond? So Bill was training a group of family law judges years ago, and they said the same thing you just said. There's so much back and forth emailing. How do we tell parents to communicate? And Bill said, well, it should be brief, 2 to 5 sentences, right? Just if you get a nasty text or email or any hostile communication, personal attacks, blame, all that stuff, just only 2 to 5 sentences max. Sometimes, 1 sentence is fine. Sometimes not responding is fine because sometimes it's just a blast. And then it should be informative. Informative means only the facts. You ignore all the blame, all the allegations, all the personal hostile, the nuances and the, poking you under the skin. Just ignore it. Stick to the facts, straight information. And then it should have a friendly tone. And that means doesn't have to be like, you're my best friend and I love you. It's more just a civil tone. If it's hard to think friendly, think civil. And then firm means just close it firmly. Say what you need to say. Like, I will be there at 5 on Saturday to pick up the child. Right? Have a nice week. Yeah. Whatever. Right? So, so we taught them this method, and they really, really liked it. And then he added on the 3 A's: no apologies, no admonishments, and no advice. And it's so tempting to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's the BIFF response method. And it's when people learn it, they are absolutely so happy and empowered because they finally have confidence about a tool that really works. And I know there's lots of great apps and software out there that do this stuff for us, but it's empowering to be able to do it yourself. And we need our brains to keep growing instead of depending on AI and everything to do it for us.
Well, and right. And you have to, you have to communicate with the co-parent. And our court system here in Florida, and I'm certain all the other states similar, you have to. I mean, you want to do this parallel parenting and never talk to them, and it's not practical. I think there are ways to minimize it, but at the end of the day, I know communication is a big thing, and I still have so many questions. But we got to take another break. So when we get back, listeners, we're gonna talk about breaking out, but I'm also gonna talk to and ask Megan, is it always just one person high conflict? Because I feel like sometimes the whole situation gets labeled as high conflict, but is it really one person, or sometimes is it both? So stay tuned so that we can get Megan to answer that on the way back. And for our listeners, if this is your favorite part of the week, please subscribe so you won't ever miss an episode. And of course, we ask that you please leave us a 5-star review, and that will help others find our show as well. We will be right back. All right, we are back from our last break. And again, today I'm joined by Megan Hunter. And as you know, if you were listening to the last segment, I wanted to ask her because, it's the label. So obviously we're talking about the High Conflict Institute, but what happens in a lot of our divorce and family law cases, they get labeled as this is just high conflict, which it is, but, and not to say, although I'm going to be one of these people because I'm like, I want to blame one person versus the other, but just, is it always one versus the other, or is it both? Like, what have you seen? What do you help me understand?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's like our brains just want to say, okay, it's conflict between two people. These people are high conflict.
Mhm.
And it's sort of an unfair label, and also it's not accurate. So if something's not accurate, then you're probably not going to take your best approach to it. So
Mhm.
I we and I just developed some slides around this recently, like in the last 2-3 weeks, to start teaching that sometimes, yes, it is two, but
Mhm.
oftentimes it's one, and it looks like two. And how do you tell? Because
Right.
what happens with a person with a high conflict personality gets under our skin, and they
Mhm.
can manipulate, and they know how to push your buttons. And so they wait till you're in court and they push that one button and you lose it, or you retort back, or something, and it makes you look high conflict. And then they're looking at the judge going, see, right?
Mhm.
Or even if they're not saying that, they're just like sitting back going, haha, yeah, there's the high conflict person. Because let me tell you this, the a person with a high conflict personality has zero clue that they have one. They believe
So
I
they're not signing up for the class, right?
no, well, they think it's awesome because we've figured out everyone else, right?
Right. Yes.
Because
Okay.
they truly, their operating system says it's everyone else's fault, and so they never see their own behavior. They don't. If you're sitting there listening to this thinking, oh, sometimes I'm all or nothing, or sometimes I lose it, well, if you're thinking about it, you're having insight, and if you're having insight, it means you don't have a high conflict personality. So I'll just say, put that out there. But we have to, as professionals, look at the behavior patterns of both people, and see who's being reasonable. Have it backed up with evidence. Have it uh, watch for the blame. We've developed what we call the web method. Listen to their words. Are they full of blame? Are they all or nothing? Are they saying things like, he didn't care about me. He just doesn't care. I never get attention. No one ever lets me talk. I will destroy that person. I, um, I need respect. I felt disrespected, right? People tell you who they are. So you put your
Right.
antenna up a little bit as, okay, I don't know that that's a high conflict personality, but I'm going to pay attention now. And then you pay attention to your emotions. Do I feel confused? Like, are things not adding up? Do I feel extreme like or dislike early on, or at any point? It's kind of an extremes thing. And then pay attention to their behavior. So it's their words, your emotions, and their behavior. Are they doing things that 90% of other people would never do, and then making excuses for it?
Mm. That's great. That one's very insightful because I could replay things, that I've heard or what I've seen, in situations. With that now, I know you talked about the until isms in your book, and so and that for our listeners, until dash isms. So I'd love for you to educate both myself and our listeners about this.
Well, and again, this is a nod to my co-author Andrea La Rochelle. She's amazing, and she's worked with so many parents, and just has such a special touch with them. And she came up with this, that we get stuck and we don't know what to do. So we're like, well, I can't do the parenting plan until I get these other things in order. I can't clean my house up until I get all these things done. I can't do this until. And if you keep doing the until, you aren't making decisions. And part of empowerment, especially as a woman, is to make solid decisions. Just make a decision. Sometimes it's
Right.
going to be wrong. Most of the time, it's probably going to be fine. Um, and you can check in with yourself and on making decisions. Is it reasonable? Does it seem like it's going to aggravate the situation? Is it being, am I being extreme? So it's good to check yourself, but don't wait until right. Everything's perfect to make decisions about your life and how you're going to, proceed forward. Because I know in my own life, it's the period of time when I'm stuck in the decision making process and unwilling to make the decision until right that I feel miserable, and then the decision's made and I feel empowered.
Yeah, I think, well, and exactly what you said, because really perfectionism is just means never doing anything because nothing is ever going to be perfect. So that's just, a way to say that, but it means basically you're not taking action. Now, and we see this with a lot of our clients, like particularly women who've thought about getting divorced for several years. I think the statistics show it's about 4 that women have been thinking about it before they take that action to reach out. But, and even though they think they want the divorce, they're still very unsure. And, what are some of the things that people use as until isms, like to hold back, particularly on the family law side?
Probably until the kids are raised, until the kids are out of college, until the kids are graduated from college, until the kids are married, until the grandkids are, and it's lots of untils. And I am not an advocate of divorce, and I am not an advocate of I love marriage. I love healthy families, but I also understand that when there's high conflict personalities involved, it's the toughest thing in the world. So, you know, like if you're a listener and you're younger and you have young children, um, you know, and married or partners with someone with a high conflict personality, get good self-care. And you may be saying to yourself, I'm going to stick in this until the kids are in school, kindergarten, or until whatever. But I would seek some consultation either from a therapist or someone you trust that can really help you think through it. And I don't want to say make decisions lightly. This having children and separating and divorce are really huge decisions. But I hope that answered your question. It was
Well,
a
it
little bit of
does, and
a
it
circle.
well, and it does, and then it really leads into the next one, because something similar is the what if, right? And like the statements we encounter in my practice often, the idea of, well, what if my attorney and I made the wrong choice? What if this is the wrong decision? What if I'm doing the wrong thing? And that's another, where, it's like, how do you encourage your clients to overcome the what if questions, or at least not allow them to be the barrier to prevent them from taking action?
Yeah, these are such huge decisions. They're impactful on our lives, and if we make that decision to divorce or separate, it's now I'm going to be a single parent, or I'm going to be so much more financially responsible, and I have to do all the work. When it's just so many things. So lots of what ifs come up. So we've developed a really simple little method called dilemmas and decisions. And if you have a dilemma, like one of those what ifs, write it down. Like, what's the core of it? What if I leave and I end up homeless, right? What if I leave and the other parent doesn't pay child support and I can't afford to keep my house? Right? So write down your core dilemma, just put it on a piece of paper, and then list of all the options you can think of on how to handle that dilemma. So, hold off on the divorce until the kids are 27. Um, go ahead and contact an attorney and see what my options are. Move in with my parents, whatever. Just write them all down. And it could be something ridiculous and silly, like just scream my head off, right? Just get it out on paper, no less than 3 options and probably no more than 10. And then you're going to check that list for your own high conflict thinking. Not that you're a high conflict person, but just it's going to help you get to the right decision. So is it coming from strong emotion and defensiveness? Am I jumping to conclusions? Am I being very all or nothing? Am I blaming someone with this? And you just ask these things, and you cross out any that have a yes answer, and you're left with ultimately with the best decision. And sometimes there might be 2 or 3 things. It might be, okay, call the attorney and just see what my options are. It doesn't mean I have to get divorced, but I can make that phone call. And then also, one of the other options might be talk to a therapist. So I can do both things, right? And what this does is it opens your mind, it expands your brain. It helps that you get into left logic brain where we can, that logic brain is built to explore options and create many solutions. So we want to get there, and we do that by making this list and then culling it down.
That's that's really amazing. And I think, and what you were saying is then look at those traits. Because so often I I believe this, I've seen it a lot, in those what ifs, in those fears, coming from a place of emotion. I think our clients feel it's all or nothing, right? Like it's all or nothing, even if I just talk to an attorney, which it's not. So much has to happen, right, before action. Or maybe if a therapist, that could be all or nothing. So I think that makes so much sense to me, that by writing it down, and it goes back to the beginning where you said writing it, like put it on paper. So now you've, and really the right decision comes from within, by you writing it down, though, because you know yourself best in your situation, and what really options there are.
Yeah, and I like what you said about it feels all or nothing in those moments.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, it just you're in a fear. We get in fear mode. These are
Right.
huge decisions and lots of what ifs, and so it can, like you said, it does come from within, but we're not going to find that without exploring it. And this is just a really simple, very free way, right? It doesn't even cost anything. You just have to
Mhm.
have a pen and paper and write it down. And but we forget to do this, and I have lots of clients that that come with a new dilemma every week, and I say, well, did you do your dilemmas and decisions checklist? And they're like, oh, I forgot. And it's just really common, so you can't beat yourself up for it and feel
Right.
guilty. You just go, okay, I'll remember next time. And it just gets to be habit, and it makes your life a lot less roller coastery.
The now we touched on perfection a little bit before, but you did write, the book talks about striving for perfection, and that the non-conflictual parent will reach for perfection in hopes of decreasing the level of contact conflict. But nothing's gonna do that, is it? I mean, really, like, how do you help, or what can you say, like, on the mindset surrounding this idea, and how to shift that?
Yeah, I mean, as women, I think we place a lot of responsibility and pressure on ourselves to be perfect and to compete in a tough world, and raise the kids and be everything and do it all, right? And I've suffered from that myself, and I don't strive to be so perfect anymore, and I rein it in when I do find myself doing that. But it is super hard, and you have to just stick with the skills like that, like using biff responses. That's if you have to write something, use biff. If you have to communicate verbally, I'll give you a quick 3 bullet point thing. You have to stop yourself before engaging, right? Engaging
That's
in
good.
arguments,
Mhm.
explanations, all that, because the high conflict person is stuck in right brain. And so you have to talk to their right brain instead of talking to their left brain where the logic is. So I call it calm before think. And it's a big B with the number 4, calm before think. You got to get the other person calm before you get them thinking. So I hear your frustration with this idea. And their right
Mhm.
brain goes, ah, great, wonderful. Right? They can't do that for themselves, but you have to do it for them. So when you have the conversation and they say, well, I don't agree to, uh, Trenton going over to your house this weekend because he has a baseball game at my house. So instead of saying, well, that's not fair, I have my rights too, right? That's called
Mhm.
engaging in the wrong way. Engaging in the right way is stopping yourself and going, yeah, I can see, that might be a little frustrating to not be able to take him to the game. So that's talking to the right brain. It's something showing empathy, attention, and respect. We call it an ear statement. And then that they calm a little bit, bring that right brain off the ceiling, and then you shift them into the left brain problem solving area with asking questions, or ask them for, like, hey, I guess I could. So it would be something like this. Here's your ear statement. Calm. I hear that you're frustrated about this, and I have some proposals, and I'm wondering if you have some proposals. So you ask a question, or you ask them for a proposal, or you ask them a question that focuses them on a choice between two or more options, or you provide information. But you don't do that in the premature problem solving until you've calmed them with a connecting ear statement.
Well, that is great. Unfortunately, our time for today is up, but this has been amazing, and I have enjoyed it so much, Megan.
Me too.
And we could go on. We could do, well, you have your own podcast, but I could have you on for weeks on end, touching on these things. So this has been so great. But you know, I would lastly like to ask you, just before we go, if you could impart for our women listeners, you know, maybe what you've learned about, you know, helping women and helping them empower themselves through your career.
Yeah, I think understanding that we don't have to be stuck in conflict, and we don't have to feel so powerless, right? I'm not a big one to say, you know, it's women's rights and all men are bad. I think that we have wonderful skill qualities in you know, across the board, right?
Mhm.
And so I like for women to just know that we all have this within us to make good decisions, to manage our emotions, to make decisions for ourselves, whatever they are, and to think about our choices, like having children and raising them in ways that will make them healthy little human beings for the planet. And we get to make a choice like that, to not perpetuate the high conflict that's been going on. So if you're listening and you're the non-high conflict person, and you've done some things that you're not super proud of, and we've all been there, you know, we've gotten emotionally hooked, we've said things we shouldn't, we've probably said things to our kids we shouldn't about their other parent, whatever. But you can repair anything, and you just stop feeling the shame, stop feeling the guilt, and make good decisions for you and for your kids.
Well, that I really appreciate it, Megan. That's perfect. And you know, we thank you so much to our guest this week, Megan Hunter. You can find her at highconflictinstitute.com. And her information and publications she's written will all be linked below in the show notes. And just really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you. Keep up the great work you're doing there in Florida. It's awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. And for our listeners, if you or someone you know is going through divorce or thinking about divorce, of course, reach out to us at FloridaWomen'sLawGroup.com or join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce, where that is a private and positive place where women can engage in conversation regarding these topics. I know I will be adding this podcast particularly, and a lot of good insights on that group. But the link will be below in the episode description. And as an additional note, we are hiring. So if you are a lawyer listening to this, licensed in Florida, please reach out to us. And we would ask you to check out our openings on the website in the career section. And again, I ask if you've enjoyed this, please leave a 5-star review so other listeners can find our content. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Women Winning Divorce. My goal is to elevate your life and the way you are thinking so that you are best equipped to win at life. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe so you automatically get my new shows every week. And I would love to hear from you personally. Come join the conversation on social and join our Facebook group, Women Winning Divorce. We welcome your comments and suggestions. We want to bring you content that helps move your life forward. Women Winning Divorce is the place for an elevated conversation on how women can thrive during times of adversity in order to live their best life.
Ask Sherwin-Williams and get 35% off Emerald products and Super Deck stains August 25th through the 28th. That means 35% off our most popular color family, blue. Psychologists have found it to be soothing and relaxing, which makes it especially great for bedrooms and bathrooms. And of course, get 35% off all of our other colors. Shop the sale online or visit your neighborhood Sherwin-Williams store. Click the banner to learn more. Retail sales only. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.